Hey guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I have WNBF Pro Brett Freeman, aka Baftub, aka Mr. Walnut Butt himself, Brett Freeman, back on the show, and we're going to be discussing his current contest prep. You might not know, he's currently in contest prep, and it's going to be an exciting chat talking about what challenges he's faced so far, what he sees the future bringing, and just digging into his pro mindset, taking it to the natural stage again. So guys, enjoy this episode, and as always, as a reminder, we are an online coaching company. That is how we make our living, and so we have many clients that we help achieve their physique goals, and we have a fantastic coaching team, if I do say myself. And if you're interested in leveling up your physique and knowledge, do check the link in the bio, and we can get a consultation going and chat about your goals and how we might be able to help, or at least you can just check out what services we offer and get a few more insights into that. Anyway, let's get into the chat with Brett. Hi guys, welcome to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I have Brett Freeman back on the podcast. I think this is our second solo kind of chats together. Brett's been on the podcast, I think, with Cliff before, and so third time kind of officially on the show, I think. But this time, much more talking about Brett versus, I think, last time. For those that don't know, Brett helped me with my kind of season last year, kind of consulting back and forth a little bit, and so we talked more about that. But this time is going to be talking, it's Brett's turn, basically. So for those that don't know, Brett is otherwise known as Baftub on Instagram, so you might kind of recognize that name, and you may recognize his physique more than his face almost, because I think your physique has become somewhat notorious within the natural bodybuilding community. He is a WNBF pro and a very good one. And well, it's your turn this year, Brett. How's it going so far? Give us a rundown of like where you started, where you are now, and how things are going. That'd be fantastic if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, definitely. So this is actually the first time I've even discussed my contest prep, because I kind of get things a little bit under wraps. Just I have a lot personally going on. So I'm currently 8 weeks into my 2022 contest prep. This is my third season competing as a pro. So in comparison to how I started preps previously, I would say from a body composition standpoint, I'm definitely in a much better place. So that has always been kind of my Achilles heel, either as an amateur or even a pro when I debuted, but also during my second season during 2019. I always started off relatively, I would say, out of shape for a bodybuilder. I mean, especially compared to nowadays standards. So I would always start very, very sloppy, and it would take upwards of at least 18 to 20 weeks to at least see something decent, in the mirror. So with the pandemic, everything post 2019 worlds, I kind of set out and set down some boundaries just in regards to the offseason. So I had a certain body composition I did not want to exceed. Now, obviously, I drove body weight up a little bit, 180s, held there for the majority of my improvement offseason. But I ensured that body composition did not get too far gone to the point that I would have to sprinkle in mini cuts. So throughout the entire 2.5, 3 year off season, I didn't embark on any mini cuts. So I didn't necessarily need a pre-prep phase or anything of that matter prior to initiating this contest prep, in which I decided to hire Cliff from the beginning. So that's another differentiating aspect from the previous preps. I always self-coached myself. It wasn't up until the final 6 to 8 weeks from 2019 Worlds where I was pretty much just mentally gone. Diet fatigue was too high. I lost all sense of, objectivity. So I'm like, all right, Cliff, I'm going to give you the keys here. So after consulting with my wife and a few other people, I decided at the start of, this season, I would just give Cliff the keys from, the go. And it's been a lot easier. I would definitely say it's just been a lot easier just from being, here, shoot, or he points, I shoot type of thing. Completely eliminated, having to play coach myself. And then on top of that, having a job, coaching online, it's made the process so much smoother, so much easier, not as much second guessing. I'm not emailing myself playing coach. So things are going pretty smooth. I'm currently 8 weeks in. I will admit, though, this has probably been the most stubborn my body has ever been, which I was just joking with Cliff about it yesterday during check-ins. I'm like, yeah, we are releasing that consistent of a rate of loss. Things are a little bit non-linear as to be expected during a contest prep, but my body just does not seem to want to go into the 160s. But pros and cons, aside, I think the biggest pro is in terms of lean body tissue. I definitely have tacked on a lot more size. So mission successful. Now, that's not saying I'm not going to be a bantamweight, but I'm kind of hoping I added at least a pound, of size to my frame.
And you wanted to get more conditioned as well, didn't you? Like you were like, I bet everyone you say that to must be like, what is wrong with you? Where are you getting this condition from?
I do actually. And I know that might sound insane to some, but I don't know if many know, like the tail end of my 2019 prep, I really felt like I was over dieted to some extent. And I feel as if I sacrificed one fullness, but also a little bit of size getting into that condition just because I wasn't as strategic, in my opinion, during that prep, since I was self-coaching myself and then I decided to hop over the cliff. So this year I am hoping, with a little bit more strategy to dial conditioning and just ever so slightly more. Try to capitalize on that Whitaker conditioning that I want to continue pushing the envelope further and further and further. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That I guess that's the hard. We've spoken about it a lot. I think even outside of the podcast, and I've seen posts of yours before, and that's kind of when you're at the level of kind of condition that you're gunning for, and what I was previously trying to gun for. You do run that line of like, can I make up this? Have I lost fullness that I can make up through refeeding or maybe even reverse kind of dieting into shows like Dirk kind of went through last season that we've spoken about on this podcast that maybe people have heard about? Or am I actually losing kind of like muscle tissue at this point? Like, and I'm actually like sacrificing because as you know, Brett, like shredded glutes don't win shows anymore. They maybe at one point were winning shows because they were kind of unique. Whereas now it's like, don't know, every other guy's coming up with like some lines in his glutes, so they're not that special anymore. So now you need like, and I think you would call it like being that complete bodybuilder.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And that's something I'm starting to realize and kind of accept. And I do think the upcoming bodybuilders are going to be better than me. I definitely think the batting class too. I just think the potential for this sport is just absolutely insane. And I think the shredded glutes, circa 2012, 2015, 2017, even 2019, like that was 3 years ago. So that conditioning is almost like a thing of the past. Like it's almost the norm almost nowadays. And I wouldn't necessarily say like the criteria has overall changed, but I just think the standards and expectations of the athletes have increased. Therefore, more of a complete package like a Dirk or I can't remember exactly the name of the guy who won last year, but he just had everything like that. I don't know if many listeners right now watched the pro ranks of Worlds last year, but Brian Whitaker didn't even place. And that's the most insane thing to think of, like considering that's, somebody who I idolized growing up and who I consider the epitome of bodybuilding from also, conditioning, but also symmetry and muscularity standpoint. I just think things have leveled up. Insanely so. And you had the AJs, you had the Chris McCready's that are just resetting the standards, or even the Dirks.
Yeah,
and it's unreal.
It is. And I think some people, unless you're a competitor, you don't necessarily see it. I have clients who, like, I don't know, even last year they watched some of my shows maybe, or watch the lineup. They're like, man, I couldn't pick apart like the top 5. And it's because there's tiny differences. I just literally posted a shots up with Dirk, and I'm like, oh man, like I can hold my own a little bit, but he is better than I am as a bodybuilder, like objectively. But unless it's small things now. There's a lot of very good people, and so like your off season now is where it's going to have been like, have you leveled up enough to kind of play with the big boys still and be as kind of such a powerful force as you were previous? And I guess, is that your focus, or what's your focus? What are you focusing on these last 8 weeks as you go forward? What do you focus on? Because I know you said like you got a lot of stuff in your life going on. You've got Cliff in your corner. So now what as an athlete do you focus on?
It's a really good question. So to be honest with you, and I don't know if I may have touched base on this in like my 2019, I did like a recap video, but I think especially after winning like my second world title, I realized that it doesn't get easier. Even after my first, I knew it didn't get easier. And it's almost like one, and I understand it's a you versus you thing at the end of the day, like journey. I 100% agree there. But when it comes to sport, being competitive, I definitely think you kind of have to have that like talk with yourself just in regards to how much you are willing to pour into the off season, but also the prep. And I knew exiting, the 2019 stage that my biggest downfall, my biggest Achilles heel has always been not having enough, consistency throughout my off seasons. So like during 2017, 2019, I had tons of months where I didn't really train. And so I had that like really, really hard talk with myself. And I'm like, if you want to continue to level up in this sport, if you want to continue, one, being relevant, but two, continue to be a competitive pro, even despite winning a world title, like you have to put in 100 to 110% during the off season. And that's something that I continued to carry on during my off season since stepping off that stage, even with the pandemic, being thrown at me. So everything that I had written out for myself, post worlds, I stuck to. And I want to say it's like one of the first times since 2009, 2011 that I really had a consistent but great environment despite everything that was going on. And I'm proud of it. And I definitely think I did, in fact, level up to the point that I can hang with maybe another lightweight class. Am I 100% confident in that? Yes and no. But I definitely think I've made improvements that would, warrant being able to get compared to a top 5 or even a top 3. But the goal, still remains the goal. And I know it might sound crazy to most, but every season, every show that I enter, I just want to place top 5, top 3. Just, given how much this sport has leveled up and evolved, since 2019. Now, is that to say that I can continue doing it forever? I don't know, but the competitive nature inside of me, like I'm not going to stop. So that's what fuels me. It's one, I would love to win another world title, but deep inside, I just want to continue to improve, continue to get better, and just see if I can, stack up and compete against the best of the best. Now, whether that's, me losing or winning. I mean, I compete just to compete, just due to being super competitive at the end of the day. So
I love that kind of explanation of your off season as well, because I think people will be able to relate to that. And we have the Improvement Season podcast, and it's named as such for a reason, because like you don't, unless you screwed up, or not screwed up, maybe you didn't do some things right dieting down to stage, the biggest improvements you're going to make is in that off season period. So it was super interesting to hear actually that you said you didn't, I wanted to ask about this actually, was you didn't take any mini cuts. So were you in a surplus that whole time gaining weight, or did you have extended periods of time where you just kind of hold your body weight and just gym performance was kind of what you were shooting for?
Yeah. So if memory serves correct, so like post worlds, obviously recovery diets for about 3 months, pandemic hit, home gym. And then it was like, I want to say June 2020 up until January of this year, like it was a straight surplus. But then when I started working with Helms for powerlifting, so we kind of switched gears a little bit from a training perspective, because I was debating on dabbling in powerlifting just to, keep that competitive edge, ticked. I was holding all reins to my nutrition at that point. It was more or less gaining at that point. So moderate surplus, training days, I would eat to satiety. I would more or less be in a surplus. And then, non-training days, I would just, intuitively eat. So body weight more or less just hovered, maintained throughout the 180s. And then if I would, during like a more aggressive block, I would push calories a little bit. For more of like a hypertrophy block where we would just peel off, I would, go back down to maintenance and just monitor visuals, but then also body composition, and then also scale weights once or twice a week.
No, that's interesting to hear about then. I guess it sounds like a long time since when you last competed, but actually when you kind of, again, if you have some periods of time where you're more so focused on powerlifting and strength, it makes sense. The volume's not there. The focus is more specific towards that. So there's no point being in a big surplus at that point. So that's really cool. actually, I should know this off the top of my head, but the bantamweight is so far away from my weight that I don't actually know what the weight competing. So what is your typical stage weight actually? So you went up to 180 and you compete at roughly, or you used to compete at, maybe it's going to be higher now.
So my most depleted weight with lift was like, it was like 143, 144, but that was super dehydrated, super depleted. Right. I was probably around 146 on stage, 145, 146. And my body weight, my stage weight hasn't really changed that much, which is, I was actually just talking with Cliff about that, since I've, monitored Brian Whitaker's career his entire life. His stage weight hasn't moved that much either. And so he did make mention that, like, we're probably looking at like a 1 to 2 pounds gain of, lean tissue, but you're probably going to be the same stage weight. I'm like, I figured as much, but okay. So I'm hoping. Sorry,
go on.
Oh no, I'm just hoping for like a 145, maybe 147, to almost get out of that damn bantam class.
Is 145 the bantams?
It's, I believe, 148.5 is the cut. Yeah, so I have a little bit of room to play with.
Okay. I guess competitively, it'd be better to be at the top end of that class than jump into the lightweights and be the lightest dude on there, maybe.
Yeah. The only downside is I'm the tallest person in the bantam class. I don't know if you've seen pictures, but yeah, Teddy and I are kind of like giants in that class. So.
And you're like 5'8", 9, or 5'7"?
Like 5'6". On a good day, 5'7".
I'm so far just average, so I'm like middleweight, middle height. So I'm like, how tall even is like Dirk? I obviously stood next to Dirk, and I know he's like he's a small guy, but I just don't know how tall he is. He's like, I never want to offend people by saying they're like 5'2". Like,
we're Sharks Burrito and Kevin Hart.
It's funny that though, because I'm the same even in the middleweights. I'm like one of the taller middleweights. A lot of middleweights like 5'8", 5'7". They're huge then in terms of like mass. Whereas like for me, I wouldn't want to be a heavyweight though, because the good heavyweights are just monsters. Like it's just crazy. Yeah. So I get that with the lightweights.
Dude, yeah, and the lightweights are, I think they range ever so slightly. It's like 5'5" to 5'8" seems to be the lightweights. I know Berto's a little bit taller for a lightweight. But then you have like somebody like Babacar, who's like 5'6", 5'7", and he's just out of this world. I didn't realize he was like around my height until 2017, and it just adds much depth and layers to this game. It's unreal.
Yeah, and he must be must be heavyweight. Like body weight would be heavyweight, I would imagine. I can't.
He was a middle, I believe. He was a middle or a light heavy at 2017. Yeah.
I just wouldn't want to be in his class. If anyone gets such, I don't know, maybe reach out to me if you want to know where Babacar is, because I can't think, that's a hard name to spell, and I can't think how to spell it, and I also don't know what his Instagram username is, but insane competitor. Like, and he stays, actually, I've watched him in his off seasons. I mean, I think this is where, when success leaves clues, he's like someone, don't look at him for successful clues, because you're so far from being Babacar, you probably can't follow how he's been successful to a large degree.
Yeah. He's such an anomaly, and it's like, he's such an outlier that it's just so cool to see though. It's so cool to witness.
And so for you now, I guess in your off season, you don't do a lot of, like, you don't macro track really closely, do you? You're more body weight and kind of keeping an eye on protein and obviously mindful, like you've tracked for ages, and so it's more of a kind of habit for you now, or did you have that and then as you've gone into prep, are you already back onto kind of tracking everything, or is there layers that you're going to introduce as you get deeper?
One second.
No worries.
No, you're fine. Okay, you're better now. So yeah, when it comes, so there was a slight difference during this off season. So it was first 6 months, post recovery, I did still semi macro track. I eyeballed everything, and then I started to just roll with the default diet, and that was one of the biggest, most consistent improvements I did make to the off season. So I was, ensuring, taking off MPS, throughout the course of the day, but also in ensuring I wasn't eating like an a-hole. So that was always one of my biggest issues too, is I would kind of get a little bit lazy and I would go strictly if it fits your macros. So this time around, I decided to be more of an adult, and I kind of had more structure within my, meal frequency, but also just food sources were a lot more wholesome and nutrient dense from a micronutrient standpoint. And I did notice tons of improvements. So that is something that I am definitely, going to continue on, post competition season. So kind of at the start of prep, I had previously started tracking prior just to get some, data, but also to relay that to Cliff. So it was kind of a mixture. I would say it was like a 50-50 tracking, intuitive, default diets, but it pretty much it's the same thing right now. It's default meal plan, more or less, 4 to 5 meals throughout the course of the day. My food sources are still very similar to the ones I was eating during the off season, just minus all of the additional excess snacking I may have done or just eyeballing here and there. But I noticed it made the transition to prep a lot more seamless this time around, which I definitely think I benefited from.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
Yeah, I guess you didn't. Well, some of the people like having those mini cuts in their off season because it like gives them practice of like getting used to dieting again.
Yes.
But I guess you didn't have that. But probably, I don't know how much that's needed. I don't know. It feels like prep is kind of like once you've done it, in some ways, it's like you riding a bike. Like it's a bit weird once you kind of get back into it initially, but then it's just like things just keep turning. This time around, obviously, kind of as you said, you've got a lot on your plate in that regard. Have you learned how to manage stress better? Have you got any kind of things that you have in your kind of day-to-day living or weekly living? I don't know, it could be meditation, whatever, that you do to kind of manage stress better?
Yeah, no, definitely. And this is something Helms tried to actually impart on me a few years ago that I was a little too stubborn to really employ, and it was setting boundaries. And I know that sounds super easy, but it's something that I always thought that I had to make myself available around the clock for everybody. And I noticed, especially within relationships, whether it be friendship or even with the wife, we both have, certain specific times where we both, have our own daily, self-care routines, or we focus on ourselves, or we have times or days that are more, relationship focused, or even with the child or with the kid. And same goes for just boundaries with social media. Same goes for boundaries with clients. And it's something that I've realized that has improved just overall well-being, but also it's minimized stress so much because I have expectations. I know, when I am available for certain people, when I'm not available, and vice versa. And if you recall, sleep was one of my biggest issues.
Yeah.
During 2019, but it's for the past few years too. And I noticed that was it. The biggest thing was just making myself available around the clock. So if it was, 11 p.m., midnight, and, somebody texted me or I got an email, I thought inside of my head that I had to, like that was something that I had to get to at that point in time. And when I realized that it was doing more harm than good, and it was actually holding me back, and I started, setting these boundaries, I started realizing productivity started to increase. Anxiety, nerves, stress started to come down, and then just overall well-being was much better. And I found that short term so far during this prep to have been, the greatest thing that I'm kind of stopping myself about during 2019, because again, when you're running on 3 to 4 hours of sleep, it's not the most productive environment for a prep, or even being a human for that matter. So.
And that the kind of sleep not being in a great place is a very common thing for a lot of competitors at that final stage. Actually, because I've been big on sleep for the last few years, and particularly because I'm close with Greg Potter, who you've probably seen come on the podcast quite a few times. So I'm like, I don't know, I always have to, I feel almost obligated because he's a friend now. Like I have to take care of my sleep big time. So anyway, I heard people in prep, I think it was last year, some people were saying how they're running on 3-4 hours sleep. And I'm like, I have no idea how you can manage that. So even just sleep for you, if you've made that again priority in off season and now in prep, your physique's going to look completely different. It's going to be wild.
And it's something that I was very stubborn. I mean, it was probably my own bias, to be honest with you. I'm like, oh yeah, you can get by on 3, 4, 5 hours of sleep. I'm starting to realize like just how chronically sleep deprived I was. I mean, just in regards to cognition, just functioning on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that's for the majority of my irritability, but just not being, really me.
Yeah, I can like I guess it's you don't know until you like know in that sense. Like that was your new normal in terms of kind of you were just used to not having kind of sufficient sleep, and now you have sufficient sleep. And it's the reason I made the kind of face is like when I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm like, man, I'm such a like lesser version of myself. So if you're always that lesser version of yourself, it's kind of like, damn. So Brett's going to be an amazing, like you're just on another level now. So that's fantastic. And I really enjoyed, because in terms of stress, obviously I brought up like meditation, and I'm glad it wasn't that, to be honest, because I don't know like how many meditation actually is very evidence-based and a lot of people can do it, but like it's kind of nicer to have a very, I think people look for, I think meditation, I would put it almost in like a supplement type of zone. So people look, oh, is it ashwagandha you introduced? Was that the difference? It's like, no, it's never going to be the difference. So kind of structure and routine, like actually that sounds like that was the biggest change in your entire off season, that you were just taking it through into prep, which is great. Yeah,
no, big time. And I've already gone through the ash, the L-theanine, the melatonin. I've tried everything from a sleep supplement, perspective, and structure, routine is the biggest thing that I've realized. Having, consistent meal timings, consistent training timings if you can, but then also a consistent sleep schedule. And I've, realized, the older you get, adulthood, blah, 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 the more that you just have to be on top of these things because you are in control. And I think it's very big to communicate that with your partner or your spouse or whoever, is involved within your support circle. But yeah, meditation, I haven't delved into. I tried yoga a few times, so with the wife. No, not my thing.
You just get, it's like I think this is a real thing actually. I was reading, it's quite slight tangent, but I think you'll find this interesting. But I was reading David Epstein, what's it called again? I keep forgetting what that book's called. Oh, The Sports Gene, that's what it's called. It's on my bookshelf, so I'm looking over here. So anyway, I heard him on a podcast, and he was interviewing this woman who just ran like a triathlon, and she's like very good at these, and he met her in the airport, and she couldn't sit still. She had to like be moving anyway, so she found it stressful just sitting still. And I'm like, whenever I go
that sounds like me,
yoga, like a massage, or like I don't know, you go to a day spa, I'm like, man, I'm more stressed after just like doing nothing than doing something.
I'm gonna have to buy that book.
Yeah, really good, The Sports Gene. Yeah, it's a good book.
Right now.
It talks a lot about basically genetics. It's kind of talking about like talent versus hard work, and like talking about, I don't know, different people and how essentially I think you'll relate to it a lot with many things in there. So awesome. I think you're one of those, I would say in regards to like talent and hard work, you're one of those, you have talents for sure, but you're not the most just gifted individual out there. You have to work for what you've achieved. Whereas there are some people that like they could do like, I don't know, if they're that talented, they're probably doing a different sport almost. Like that sort of
probably.
Talent.
If I could dunk, I'd play basketball, but
Yeah. Actually, that's the best. Like whenever someone says, oh, genetics mean nothing for bodybuilding or whatever, it's not my genetics, it's my hard work. It's like, you just bring up basketball players and be like, so do you think you could work hard enough to be a basketball player? Like be the best in the NBA? And they're like 5'6", and you're like, well, you ain't got a chance, So I know Berto said like bodybuilding is one of the most genetically determined sports, which is kind of crazy to think about actually, in many ways, but you can do a lot still, like yourself.
Yeah.
In terms of, I wanted to talk about, obviously Cliff, I guess, is he running your training as well, or are you taking control of that element?
Nope, that's me. So he's just talent in nutrition. I check in with him. He's tells me what to do afterwards, and we keeping it super simplistic. He initially wanted to ask if I wanted help with supplementation or training. I'm like, no, I've been doing this for so long. I was debating on having Helms do my training at the same time, but I'm like, I can more or less program myself from a bodybuilding perspective.
Sure.
Plus, I know Helms is super duper busy with Bryce and Jessica, so decided, why not?
Yeah, for sure. Has your training changed? I know people actually probably think it's changed, but obviously you've just described you're powerlifting and now you've gone into the you're back to bodybuilding kind of thing. But has your perspective changed at all this off season or anything in that regard, or how's that looking for you?
I mean, I would on the surface level, to a lot of people, it's going to look like it's more hardcore, I suppose, in more top set, back up sets. I guess just from like a sequencing perspective, it's not as full body or powerlifting intensive as, what Eric had programmed, but it's very reminiscent of how I trained previously, just with how I've structured training. It's push pull off, push pull legs. But each, day, push days have, extra arm work, and, my pull days actually start off with direct arm work first, and then it carries on into, your back movements. Legs are only being trained once. So I suppose that's probably the biggest difference, because I used to split it up into 2 sessions throughout the week. But I realized just due to them being a little bit more, just from a genetic standpoint, they don't require as much volume. They don't require as much intensity. Plus I'm still maneuvering around that like lower back hip glute issue that I've had for the past year-ish. So I'm just able to really give a little bit more attention just to upper body, since that's, been the Achilles heel my entire career. But I think just in terms of just like sequencing within a session, it might look a little bit different on paper. So like for some of my pull sessions, I'll start off with biceps, and then I'll, do 2 to 3, direct bicep movements, throw in a lateral raise movement, and then go on to my back movements. And I haven't seen any negatives associated with, performance. So I find that's allowed to retain tissue a little bit better with arms. Plus, when you tack them on at the end of the session, your focus, effort kind of dips a little bit. Yeah. And it's just another way to not have a direct arm day. Every now and then I might, but
no, that's really interesting. And I guess it's good for the listeners to know, like, it's kind of like, your legs are almost at maintenance, and then you'll put, are they still at 1 session a week during dieting as well? Actually,
they are. So they are currently, but I'm training legs after this podcast. So depending how the next 2 to 3 weeks play out, given, the phase that we're digging currently, which is the only fun, I suppose, that I have for this currently. Because at the moment, the amount of volume that I'm currently performing for my 1 leg session, it's starting to get a little bit excessive. And, as prep prolongs, you might want to split it up into two sessions. So I'm probably going to be venturing down that route.
And you mentioned digging. The listeners, some of them are probably going to want to know, what does that look like for you at the moment? How does it differ to other phases?
Yeah. So, I don't know if whoever might be listening, I've always been looked at as like, the person who diets on high carbs, they're able to, get by on like a higher intake with performing no cardio. So this time around, since no prep is ever the same, we've had to make adjustments almost like every single week. So So for the past 8 weeks, we've made around, I want to say 6 adjustments. So given the time schedule, given the season that I set out for myself, first show is 9/24. So we're 3 months out, it looks like 3 months and 2 weeks. We want to get ahead of the pace. So we're embarking on a digging phase. So I know macros don't really matter that much, but my carbs are at 220, which is the lowest, they've probably ever reached this early into a contest prep. That's normally reserved for like maybe 4 to 6 weeks out from like a warm-up show. Why? I don't know. I have some speculation. It could be, due to stress from the past, previous months and years. But again, I don't really look at it every single prep as being the same. So I'm just going to more or less do what is required to get there. And, put my head down, get through this little digging phase. I've been here before. I'm no stranger to starving myself. So just going to do what I have to do.
And it's I know Cliff is very big on making change. Like if you're not kind of on target, a change is made. I know he's very big on that. So that doesn't, it kind of sounds like a lot of changes to me, because I've always been on, like, I don't know, I try and go on the other end, but sometimes, especially when you have a, like and I think for listeners who are more Gen Pop, they're probably like, oh, it sounds like a lot of changes. But when you do have a deadline, and for you, especially Brett, when you need to be at that competitive level, like you don't want to turn up any less of like kind of the most competitive you can be than at all. So you're very happy also to take, like, let's see a change.
Oh yeah.
But I guess and I imagine those changes, some of them are fairly, like, they're not like, I don't know, huge. They're like small adjustments to just see if that's enough to kick you in the right direction type of thing.
Yeah. So Cliff and I are like, Cliff, you and me are actually, I mean, tons of others I would assume are very similar when it comes to making those adjustments in the beginning. So first few weeks, we only made very minor adjustments, 10 to 20 grams reduced. See if the scale gets moving. Okay, nothing's moving. All right, let's remove, 2 to 4 grams of fat. All right, nothing's moving. Let's make a, slightly bigger adjustment, 20 grams here. Honestly, the past 2 weeks, another like 20 gram reduction. But this past week was kind of like I guess, dropping the hammer, so to speak.
Right.
We removed 70 grams of carbs, which is pretty big jump. And then refeed day got dropped down. I think it was like 60 grams as well. So, I mean, about I think it was like a 300 calorie reduction, give or take.
Sure.
But yeah.
And I know refeed days are something that you've always tended to have in a prep, right?
Yes. For myself, I've always responded relatively well to 1 to 2, upwards of 3, depending on, how depleted I may be. But definitely when I self-coached myself, it was double or at least triple refeeds, throughout the week.
And when you're attacking them at the moment, not attacking them, that sounds so weird. When you're using them at the moment, that's like attacking. For some reason, that makes sense in my bodybuilding head, attacking a refeed. When you're going through a refeed, what does that tend to look like for you? Is it carbs raising up and you're just increasing kind of current food sources, or?
Yeah. So that's a big difference. In something that I've preached to my clients too, past few years. When you get a refeed, don't necessarily reintroduce foods that you haven't been eating. Obviously, you can get some cravings out here and there, but I definitely think you should treat it more like a robotic bodybuilder at that point and just increase, the carbs that you were normally consuming, just so there isn't any inconsistency within, the sources that could either, detract from the look, from the scale, et cetera. But with Cliff, fat intake gets bumped up a little bit, about 3 to 5 grams, and then carbs get increased as well. So the only difference from what I had previously done, I just used to just increase carbs and not fat intake. So, okay. And then protein gets lowered ever so slightly.
Okay. For some reason, all I got in my head is a Pop-Tart. I was just thinking, you got some fats, you got some carbs. The Pop-Tart's the perfect solution there.
That's
you're probably
not.
You're not eating the Pop-Tart at the moment.
It's funny you say that, because I think I was with my stepson the other day at Walmart, and we were in the breakfast aisle, and he was looking at Pop-Tarts for the first time forever. He's like, "Which one are your favorites again?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's been a long time." I'm like, "The confetti," and I noticed they rebranded the name of it. I thought that was funny.
That is funny.
So, haven't had a Pop-Tart in forever.
I hadn't, and it's weird how you go through. I bought them the other day. I was like, I'm just gonna try one. Like, I'm in that point in my gaining phase where I'm like, I need to, you just have to get the food in. But I suppose you don't actually probably hit, because it sounds like in your off seasons, you tend to quite, like, you could keep going. Like, it's almost, you have to kind of hold yourself back a little bit. Or do you get to that point as well where you're like having to make choices just to get calories in for calories' sake?
Yeah, no, there was so when I had to, because my body did not like the 180s, so I almost got up. I was almost a real man, so I almost got up into the 190s. I was trying to get to that. I was trying to get to that too. I wanted to just touch 200, super bloated at night. Never happened, so I'm not a real man. But there were points during that like push-up phase where I just like anybody else, like it was uncomfortable. It was hot. It was humid, and so there were moments in time where like the majority of my calories were from liquid calories, so Gatorade, fruit juices, but then I would sprinkle in Pop-Tarts, fruit snacks here and there. But then afterwards, I would just let my body weight fluctuate, just let satiety just regulate things, and I would, allow body weight to come back down. then I would continue eating back up. But no, there were definitely weeks at a time where, just like yourself, I had to kind of force feed myself to hold that weight. And it's funny, like with bodybuilding, you're never content with either spectrums. I feel you're either too uncomfortable force feeding foods, continue making gains, or you're starving yourself and eating high volume foods sometimes. and it's like within that gray area, people don't want to be, I feel. But
yeah, it's not super nice. Actually, that's something. Where has your perspective changed at all? And I actually don't know what your original perspective was. So, or where is your head at in terms of like pushing up? Because obviously you didn't push up quite as much. That was kind of strategic in terms of not having to take off huge amounts of weight. But do you feel like pushing to that kind of degree of discomfort is almost required, or for some people?
Yeah, I think it kind of scales with training age. And I suppose, like, I guess we can ask like how close we are towards genetic ceiling. I just think past like a certain level of advancement in training age and career, I think you're doing more harm than good, especially from like a health perspective. Continue driving up body weight for the sake of it, in hopes of gaining that half a pound to a gram of lean tissue, just to have to sacrifice it and diet all the way back down. But I definitely think there's merit, like in your teen years, your early 20s, especially if you are far and away from like your genetic ceiling. I think you can get a little bit more dirtier from a push-up phase, standpoint. But when you're in your 30s, mid 30s, 40s, how much lean tissue are you really putting on getting floppier? Is what I do question. I'm still a little mixed with that, because we still see, somebody like Jeff Alberts. He doesn't necessarily stay too lean, from a bodybuilder perspective, but he's still able to make improvements.
Yeah.
We see it with the Kent Beerleys. We see Marshall Johnson. He's still making improvements, but he stays more on the relatively leaner side, I would say. And then even with like, the Yaya Tomasis, Paul, he's in his 50s too. He's still making improvements also, but he's about like 20, maybe 30 pounds above stage weight. So I think like looking at the success of like those that are at the top, looking at the genetic outliers for one, and then also looking at maybe the mid-tier pros too, like they're hanging out anywhere between like 20 and 40 pounds above stage weight, depending on height, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah, I think the younger you are, the more you can get away with it. I think as you advance, I think it should come down a little bit. How about you, though? What's your perspective on that? Because I know you...
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we pride ourselves on providing personalized service that will take your physique and knowledge to the next level. If you're interested, check the description and sign up.
Yeah, I tend to...
It's a hard one.
I come back to... This is the way I try and get an answer to this question that feels right, in that when I think about what's growing muscle, it's training performance. And so I think you want to be a body composition where you're performing well and you feel good. So for some people that might be a bit leaner. For some people that might mean, like you said, like pushing 40 pounds above stage weight till they actually feel like they're even like hormone levels and their like libido's back to normal. Like if you're still struggling to get, I don't know, libido, like your libido when you're like 20 pounds above stage weight, you probably need to push it up a little bit more, assuming it hasn't just like happened in the last like month after show, because obviously there's a time component there. So that's where I tend to sit. And I just struggle to think, I don't know, for myself, like 200 pounds, it's funny you bring that up because I've only got up there once ever. And people have been asking like, are you going to push above that this time? And I'm like, I just don't know how worthwhile it will be, because for me to get above 200 pounds, I feel awful. And it just takes away from how I feel day to day. And then training performance isn't as good. Recovery is not as good. And I can't imagine that's productive for me. Whereas for another person listening, probably a lot of people listening, they're like, I could easily 5'10", like I can get to 200 pounds, I can push to 220 or whatever. I'm like, great, if you can do that and you can train well and I guess not look too sloppy, I guess that's something to bear in mind. At least take some kind of mini cuts to make it look a bit better some of the time and travel up. But yeah, that's where I try and find like a rational answer of, okay, training performance is most important, so whatever body comp is driving that the best. But it's hard.
No, it really is. And I feel like the goalpost might change like maybe every off season.
Sure.
And I've something I've realized too, and I think I was talking to Jan about this a few years ago. I've noticed like past a certain body weight, leverages just go to crap too, even during the off season. And so we sometimes only think of it on the way down, but I've noticed, especially being productive, having a productive training environment, to continue pushing performance up from. I think for some, like during the off season, not necessarily from like a cardiovascular standpoint, but I just think leverages an ability to perform red lines. And if you've ever noticed anything, like when you mini cut or when you're coming down from a contest prep, you might reach a certain body weight range where performance and everything is just rock solid. And I think it was Bertle that like made mention of this. I think it was like with his powerlifters. He's noticed his powerlifters perform the best when they slightly, mini cuts, not necessarily down to the weight that they're going to be competing at, but it forces them to, one, be a little bit more habitual, but a little bit more intensive and effort focused towards like what they're doing, like with the task at hand. And it kind of makes me want, and performance still goes up linearly. It makes me wonder if you necessarily do have to continue driving body weight up, or if you could maybe go up within a 5 to 7 pound range, come back down, and then just, continue repeating that process. Now, obviously it would, require 1 to 2 years, to put forth almost like a spinning the wheels effort, but like just something that I question too, that I wonder, but because you see somebody like Taylor Atwood, for instance, really good powerlifter. And the best powerlifters, if we, monitor them, obviously from like a hypertrophy standpoint, they're not always growing, but they're continuously getting better, block in, block out, year in, year out. And I do think body composition does improve over the course of that time. So maybe something we could learn from them, but so much.
It's a tough one, because I'm almost to the point where I'm almost anti body recomposition, just because I already think it's so hard to gain muscle that I just hate the idea of someone working so hard to gain this muscle and then just maintaining and being like, maybe you grew, but you quite possibly just maintained the same. Yeah. So,
and that's why that's kind of why I am like, all right, maybe. So if you push up, then you're going to actually have that, objective. Okay, I did gain, therefore I probably did put on some tissue. And it's also, it sells to the client too. Like if you're the same body weight, same this, same that, it's like, oh, am I really improving?
Yeah.
We don't know.
So I'm glad we've got that kind of, that agreement. And you didn't do that in your off season, because that's what I thought you may have done in terms of like holding your body weight and then just kind of going up. But you weren't doing that at all, which makes much more sense to me. I think that's, for me at least, more logical. And that is the approach you're kind of describing is almost what I did last off season, which I think went really well for me. But I do think you can use mini cuts too often. And I'm trying to, in this instance, be a bit more sparing with my implementation of them. So only using them as like when I really need it, not just, I could just throw one in now because I feel pretty good, but also dieting doesn't sound like the worst thing. I'm like, no, I need an actual reason to be using that. Because as you said, like you're in surplus that whole time, because every time you take yourself out of that, you're stopping growing and you're now potentially impacting. It's kind of like you build momentum as well in that kind of period of time when you're gaining.
Yes. And that's kind of similar to like how I'll map somebody's macro cycle out. It's like I'll, have a paradigm set up for like the amount of lean gaining to maintenance to mini cutting. But if, everything's going really smooth and, we might have a maintenance, prior to a mini cut upcoming, I want to continue milking that. And I think the same should be, said for our off season or improvement seasons. If you're looking good, performance is good, you aren't hating food, you aren't, super fatigued, I think continue gaining, because that's just more deposits into the hypertrophy bucket. So, and especially like at the levels of, bodybuilding, how much it's involved, more time gaining is, just going to be a little bit more conducive, I feel, towards the end goal.
Absolutely. Awesome. Brett, I want to make sure people know, you mentioned a show you're doing, the first show of the season. Are you happy to reveal like the dates of shows and when you're planning to compete? Yeah. Just so people know and they can follow along. I don't know how much you're hoping to document, I imagine, as much as whatever is least stressful, because it can be stressful to document it as a competitor. I know how stressful that can be.
Yeah, no, that's something I've actually wanted to do a little bit better this time around. Since last prep, I wasn't really able to document as much. So
I haven't had any glute shots yet.
You haven't? No, you haven't. So I actually posted up if I can find it, my show schedule. All right, here we go.
This is on your Instagram?
It is, yes. Yep.
I clearly missed it.
Yeah, my posting is my posting is meant like in the morning. I'll post something, bounce, and that's it. So my 2022 show schedule at the moment, I'm gonna try to do more shows if I can. Since this is gonna be one of my last seasons for a while, given the expansion of the family and everything. So 924 is gonna be the WNBF Pro Universe. So that's gonna be the show with Berto and a few others. And I am so damn excited. So damn excited. It's been one of my bucket list goals for my entire career, is getting to be on the same stage as Berto. So I'm really looking forward to that. First few shows are going to be warm-ups, so I'm not going to be in peak condition. Glutes won't be entirely peeled. Then my second show is going to be the Mr. America. So that'll be October 8th. And I don't believe that has a sanction or anything. I'm just mainly doing that just due to being able to compete against like the best of the best. I want to get stomped by Mishak, who's an incredible competitor. Third show is up in the air at the moment. I'm deciding between the OCB Cape Cod or the WNBF Monster Mash, which is another show that's hosted by Nancy Andrews, who also runs that WNBF Pro Universe. Fourth show is going to be the OCB New York State Natural. I intend on doing that as an amateur just to compete. It's going to be a little bit more local. It's up in Syracuse, New York. And then final show is going to be WNBF Worlds. And that's, the end goal. Hopefully they have a bantam class. If they don't, I'll have to battle it out with all the lightweights. But I'm really looking forward to it.
Is that in Miami? So if you ever heard a few people say Miami for Worlds.
I think it's back in Cali again. Let me double check really. Yeah, I'm like 90.
Oh, maybe
sure.
next year might be in Miami. Actually, that might be.
I think next year it's going to be back on the East Coast. Yeah, it was supposed to be in either Boston or New York this year, but they're keeping it in Cali. Yep, it's in LA. So I'll get to pop that cherry of being in Cali.
You haven't been to California yet?
I have not. I'm looking forward to it though.
That's exciting. Yeah, I guess it's nice having the local shows. Sometimes, no, it's always better to have local shows. It's not like it's fine traveling, but ideally you want them local so you can, have everything in your environment and you don't have the stress of travel. Sometimes can be difficult, but I suppose you have quite a bit of experience with like traveling to shows, and you obviously helped me with my travel to Vegas and everything. Which I probably you probably looked at me and was like, I was way over analyzing everything.
No, you were actually you've flown way more than I have. So I've only flown once, and that was actually for the Max Height show. That was Chris Bearcat and Chris Alkin's show back in 2019. So for Worlds, it'll be an entirely different experience having to fly out to Worlds. So I've always drove the Worlds. So I drove down to Boston, and I drove down to New York. But nothing is going to beat my drive down to New York City. It was like Thursday night. We had to drive at like 10 p.m. and I didn't get into New York until I think it was like 3 or 4 in the morning. I had Polly at like 6 in the morning. So it was a crap show. So we're hoping ideally to land in Cali like Wednesday, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday of that week. Sure. So I have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Nice.
So Cliff will be there too. So I'm looking forward to meeting Cliff in person. So
that's exciting.
I'm excited, man. I'm excited. Especially with the 3DMJ family. I'll be in there too. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Are you going to be?
I have no plans to be there at the moment. I don't have any clients who are going to be competing there. Not at the moment anyway, unless someone like randomly reaches out to me and I'm like, yeah, let's go. And I get my ticket to Worlds. I would be there if I had a client. At the moment, I'm not sure that I'll be able to make the trip there, but it's was an amazing experience to like meet so many people. So I know you'll have like an incredible time. You'll be like a little mini celebrity. Everyone will want to come and get a picture of you in the glutes. So that'll be exciting. So
yeah,
this
it'd be
is
really cool.
just to reflect. This is your third pro season, right? How many seasons before you went pro? So what's this like? How many seasons have you done total now?
It's funny you said. I was actually just reflecting on that because I've done 4 seasons.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, you went pro quick.
See, you say that it's weird to think of it like that because those 4 seasons like encapsulate, I think it was 10 years almost. It's really weird to think of. So yeah, my first season was 2019. I only did 1 show. My second season was 2011. I did like 10 shows. And then I took 6 years off and I came back in 2017.
Wow, yeah.
And yeah. So this will be my fifth year competing. Or fifth season.
I didn't realize you had that crazy hiatus. That's actually, mad to think about that amount of time.
Yeah. And I wonder like what if almost sometimes
Sure.
with that hiatus. So, but.
And I just had one kind of final question for you, Brett. For those who are obviously I think natural bodybuilding is attracting more and more kind of the younger generation. It's getting a bit more popular.
Exactly.
I think partly social media is doing that. Do you have any advice for those who are like coming up through the sport? Obviously, you've been competing a long time. You've seen it evolve. What kind of thoughts do you have towards those who are coming up through it?
No, it's going to sound really cliche, but find a mentor that you can learn from, be educated from, ask questions. Don't ever stop asking questions, and put in 100% efforts. But then also realize that you have to have patience, especially for natural bodybuilding. The sport, and again, it's cliche, but it's literally like watching paint dry, especially if you don't have that genetic response that you thought you were going to have. And yeah, get really, really, really good at the basics. But again, find somebody that you can learn under and, learn as much as you can, but also enjoy the process and the journey of it. Because it's weird reflecting on the past 10 years because I can still remember when I was 19, when I was 21, and it really does happen like that. So delayed gratification. That's the name of the game with this sport, I have found. It really is.
That defines natural bodybuilding. I guess bodybuilding as a whole, but more the natural side because it's so slow, comparative.
Big time, yeah.
And it's actually great knowing as well because you had that 6 years off, then you competed. You could have quite easily like fallen out of love with it in that time, but you fell back in love with it, and that's really nice to see as well because I think that's what you need to keep leveling up in this. I keep saying level up, but keep improving. Like you said, it's a very slow process. Sometimes you don't even know if anything's happening, like paint drying, like you said. That analogy is perfect. So you just have to put in your best efforts and, like you said, fall in love with that process. So it's really nice to see. I think people are going to be very interested to follow the journey. You haven't shared any physique shots on your page, have you, recently? No. Do you have a time you might do that, or is it like when you feel good and ready to, or are you keeping it under wraps? Keep a hoodie on.
I'm thinking maybe crack into the 160s. I'm thinking like right around like maybe lower 160s, mid 160s is what I'm thinking of, because I think that was my last physique update, and I don't want to post anything. There's tons of improvements now that could be seen, but they're, taking in natural lighting, and you know how social media is. You want to make it the most drastic of a change where it's like, oh, okay, I can see the improvements. And that's another thing I've been like battling back and forth with. The wife told me that I should probably post not in order. So post older pictures to kind of build up hype. But I feel, quite a bit of pressure, like having to show improvements, just given that's right. And that's like another thing that people do. They don't really speak on them as much, I feel, within like social media, but also within competitive bodybuilding. Like the amount of pressure that, does get placed upon an athlete to, perform, but also improve and meet expectations of either those that look up to you or your followers for that matter. But 160s, I'll definitely probably share an update.
The key, Brett, is not to be very good. Then you have no pressure. That's what I find. I'm like, no one expects me to be that outrageous, so I have no pressure here. It's like everything I do is good. Whereas, yeah, for you, you're already pro. People are expecting big things, especially, I guess, for someone like yourself. You did become notorious for the glute shreds and everything like that. So I have no doubt that it's all going to come in. You're going to feel much more confident as like the condition comes through. I'm sure you feel pretty confident now, but your confidence will just spike as you see that like all the condition come through earlier, and you're just like, oh, okay, here it is, now I'm coming through. I know, just because of my personal experience there as well, where it's like, oh, like I never saw my quads at this weight or whatever it is. So once that kicks in, once you're through, you're kind of in that, I guess what Jeff Alberts calls like the tweener stage, where it's like you're not quite shredded, you're not quite like bulky, so it's like it's that uncomfortable stage. So yeah, best of luck with the digging, and thank you for taking the time to come on. Actually, everyone needs to thank Brett big time, because we are now like running the podcast for over 5 years. We've never missed a weekend, and I almost had to, I was like, it felt like I was guilt tripping Brett to come on, not that I needed to, because you were coming on anyway, and I was like, oh man, I don't want to miss a podcast this weekend. So thank you for being here. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll do another one of these in a few months' time, probably when you're in the 160s and your face will be looking deathly, and we'll be talking more. So thank you for coming on, and
thank you for having me, Steve. Thank you for having me on. Thank you.
And yeah, for sure, people, again, like I said, Baftub over on Instagram, make sure you're following, because I think it's going to be an interesting journey to stage, and a fun one. It's always fun with Brett as well, because as you've listened, he's kind of very personable and isn't like, I don't know, some bodybuilders who like to be hardcore all the time. You're very real about the process and making a laugh about it and enjoying the process. So I really appreciate that about Brett. So guys, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Flor. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.